What's up, Rockstars? Today I'm going to be talking about all the details and information you've been asking for Darkest Dungeon. I have access to the rulebook, images, all that kind of stuff. We're going to dive into it. We're going to discuss it right now. Now, as always, I'd like to first thank my patrons and YouTube members. It is through their financial support that much of this is possible, from the filming equipment to just being able to do 2 to even 3 videos a week. All of that is thanks to them, so thank you so much for that. That being said, I know that's not for everybody. If it's an offhand thing, you can always like the video, share it, make a comment, let me know I did a good job. Or if you have any questions, be sure to ask those below as well, and either I or Leo or somebody will answer them, I'm sure. Additionally, there's merch link, there's Amazon links, there's all sorts of stuff down in the description. Additionally, you can follow the Darkest Dungeon link over to something that pertains to the game, so you can kind of follow along there as well. Alright, with that, one last disclaimer, the rulebook is not finished yet. It's quite well along. Actually, it's even like formatted. It looks very nice. It reads very well, even in English. But it's still subject to change, right? They're still kind of working on the game and developing it and taking in feedback and all that kind of stuff. So, and additionally, I might just get something wrong. It happens. If so, I'll try and, have the corrections in the description as well so you can see those. But in general, we should be on a good standing here. So let's go ahead and get right to it. Alright, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the board game. I'm not going to be talking so much about the video game and the differences and similarities. If you've played the video game, then you'll know the difference. If you haven't played the video game, then you'll still learn about the board game, though I highly encourage you to go ahead and try out the video game. It's not super expensive, and it's actually really, really good. It's super addicting. You'll spend too many hours in it, trust me. Anyway, I'm going to be talking just quickly about the setting. We'll just kind of go from there. So first things first is you have the town where you've been drawn from. So essentially you have like a distant relative that says, hey, you have this inheritance and there's a lot of money here, but you got to come here and like clean up the place a little bit before you can get it. And so I'm going to come back to this to describe the town phase, but I want to get to combat first, right? So you'll come from this to actually go on these quests. Now, how this game works is there are quests and bosses. And you have to do 2 quests and then fight the boss, and then 2 quests and then fight the boss, 2 quests fights the boss, and then you can go to the Darkest Dungeon. And the Darkest Dungeon's super bad. We're not going to touch that too much yet, but there's a ton of badness in the Darkest Dungeon. It's not a good place to be. And then after that, you win the game, or you die a lot. Anyway, you'll take these quests, and they can range from like, this is a fundraiser. So in this one, you're going to go through and you're just going to try and get money. And you can actually kind of stop early, or you could go and keep getting money. And the more money you get, the more XP that you get at the end. You can level up. Or you get a scout ahead where you have to go and clear rooms. And as you're clearing rooms, each room you clear, again, has some XP. Now, one thing you're going to note here is that you see these little symbols here. So like this is a trap, and this is a battle, and this is an empty room. And so there's all these different tokens that you're going to grab. And what you do is you grab those tokens and you lay them down here. And so you kind of have this randomly generated like a dungeon where they're not all connected like this, right? So they're different shapes and different lengths, and there are even some long passages and all that kind of stuff. But you lay them down face down so you don't know what room's coming next, and then you kind of scout over and explore. And so you're like, oh, okay, now we're going to be in battle. Oh, now we're going to get a treasure. Eventually, you're going to be fighting the boss. Now, the boss, this is a necromancer here. It's typically the first boss in the video game. It might not be the first boss that you fight in the board game, because you're going to kind of be drawing these boss cards. Now, the boss is bad. Now, first of all, they're going to be affecting your town phase and your, battle phase, your actually exploring phase, your delving phase, your dungeon phase. So in this one, for instance, he's going to make it to where you essentially have unholy monsters. So you're just going to have these skeletons and all these like witchcraft people and stuff like that. You're not going to have something like a beast, like a scorpion or something like that. So this just makes it to where you're fighting these unholy things, and that kind of gives it a little bit of a flavor to it, right? Because you're going to be fighting these different types with this different monster. Additionally, you'll notice on the flip side is that the graveyard is blocked. Now, the graveyard, I'm going to come quickly back to here, is this spot right here. And essentially what that means is that you can't go there, and at the graveyard there you get a virtue, or essentially a buff that you can get, but then you're a little bit closer to death because of it. This game's crazy, so that's why that's like that. But either way, it affects every part of it until it's dead. Those are passive. They're always going on until you defeat the necromancer. That's going to be your game that you're going towards. So you get in those quests. Now, a little bit more context. We have these comics that they have for each of the different kinds of characters. I don't know if this is just flavor text for them or if they're actually going to incorporate it. I have a suspicion it's just kind of a flavor thing for the characters themselves, but they're really cool. I really like this one, so I'm going to go ahead and share it. Just going to give you an idea of it. So first of all, you notice there's no words, but it still kind of tells a story about how you got to where you're at. So in this one, his father's going out to be a soldier to join the army, and you can see he has this kind of wife and little tiny kid sucking his thumb, looks like, in a little tiny farm cottage area. He goes and he's fighting, and eventually he's just making a name for himself, doing really good in battle. So they give him some armor and he keeps doing good. And eventually he's leading whole armies into battle. And then finally he's able to come back. And you can see it's years later. His son's now grown up and even older than he was before, almost as tall as his mom now. And he looks at that, and you can see behind him is in his headspace is still that battle, is still the war and everything that he's had to do for that. And so he turns away and says, I can't go back to that life anymore. I'm not the same person. First of all, that's just powerful and really cool. And I love the art style of how it's done. I think it's super intelligent, especially that background shift when you go back and look at him after he sees his family and the color shift there. Just completely awesome. That's great stuff. I would buy that hardbound. Just saying, Mythic. That's good stuff. Okay, so moving on, you're going to go into this dungeon. Now, the dungeon has these different tiles, and the tiles are based off of the quest. So if you go back to your quest, you're going to see that you have these little things like this is a trap, and this is a battle, this is an empty room, there's some treasure in this one, and you can see the quantity that you take. So essentially you take all these and you shuffle them around, and you put them upside down, and then you put them on this map here. And so as you're exploring, you don't know what's coming next. It might be a battle, it might be a treasure room, it might be an empty room and nothing. It might be just somewhere you can rest. It doesn't matter. You can get some quests that will actually get you firewood, and then you get to rest and kind of, they're for longer missions, so kind of partway through you can heal some stress and some health. We'll get into this health and stress and all that kind of stuff here in just a little bit. That's kind of the main structure. So you're going on these two quests, and each quest has you going through this kind of dungeon, doing a different objective. And then as you go there, you're going to fight battles, you're going to get treasure loot, you're going to almost die or die, and then you're going to come back. So let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, you're going to be rolling several dice here. So you have these provision dice. And what that is each person just rolls the dice, and what you get is what you get. So you have like torches, you have food, and you have this DD or Darkest Dungeon symbol, which just means you can place it on whichever one you want. So sometimes you're going to go hungry and you need to eat. Sometimes you need to raise the light level because your torch is going out, it's getting darker. And the darker it is, the worse it is for you. Enemies are going to start criticaling you, they're going to start acting, it's just going to be bad. But then maybe you also need, another potion that stops bleeding or blight, which again we'll get into in a little bit. Or a shovel to get rid of a barricade, because otherwise you're digging with your hands, you end up hurting yourself. So there's a lot of different things, and that's kind of a community pool. So you all roll, but then you have this pool that you can pick from, and you can be like, okay, I want this one or I want that one. And you can do that. Additionally, as you're moving around, you're also, to even get to the part, you are going to be rolling these dice, and this tells you whether or not, I know this image is hard to see, but there's like a trap here and stuff like that, or a battle. And so there's different things that can come up kind of haphazardly as you're traveling. And again, a lot of this is just like the video game. And then sometimes nothing happens. There's some blanks there too. Now, let's talk about the main structure. Okay, so we're at a room. We're going to fight some bad guys. What do we do? So in Darkest Dungeon, if I could summarize it in the simplest way, is it's 4 versus 4, typically. Sometimes some bad guys take up more than one spot, or you're fighting a boss or something like that. But either way, it's usually 4 versus 4, and different, depending on your position, you can do different things. And depending on the position of the enemies, they can do different things. So if you're a melee guy and you're all the way in the back of the line, well, you're probably not going to be doing much melee. But hopefully you can do some magic spell or some incantation or potions or something, right? Otherwise, you're kind of useless and you're going to want to move up. So there's going to be a lot of pulling and pushing where either you're changing the direction of the enemies or you. So you can see here how they have it separated is they have the support on the very left and the very back. Then they have ranged in the middle back, and then they have defensive, which is kind of the middle front, and then the very front is aggressive. Those are kind of the different blocks. And a lot of that is just for symbology, and so they're not using numbers. It's a little bit more thematic. They could do 1, 2, 3, 4, but that's kind of silly. And then they can also kind of tie it into your abilities, because oftentimes that's the case. If people in the back are doing ranged or support, people in the front are doing melee attacks or defense. So you have to assign your card onto one of these spots. Now, you can shift through it freely, you can do all this kind of stuff, but for the most part, you're wanting to be there, but maybe you have a good heal spell and everybody's hurt, so you need to go help the healer, so you're going to shift back a few times, or maybe you're pushed back by an enemy, and then suddenly you have a different skill set that you can do. You're going to notice there's a round counter up at the top. Essentially, you have 4 rounds to beat the bad guys, and then if you don't beat them, you gotta restart. You gotta do it again. But you can't just refight that fight. You have to kind of like travel back and then travel back to it, or skip that, or whatever. But either way, you didn't win if that's the case. It just kind of instantly stops. The only time that doesn't happen is if you're fighting a boss battle. As you're fighting the boss, it just freezes and you just fight the boss. Now, if you fight the boss and there's still some bad guys, you might then have that round timer start going again as you have to defeat everything. But for the most part, it's 4 rounds and then you're done. And that keeps the game just flowing and makes sure that you don't dilly-dally around or play too defensively or something like that. The only other thing you'll notice here is the torch on the top. And so it starts at 5. Now, traditionally in the video game, it goes left and right. In this one, it says 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. It goes from brightest at 5, darkest at 0. Now, you'll notice different things. So at 4 and a 3, both you and the heroes, both the heroes and the monsters, get a +1 to their crit. We'll explain how to get criticals in a second. After that, they take +1 stress. That's the stress symbol there. After that, even more stress. And after that, the monsters suddenly are more accurate and they are dodging more. Now, that is accumulative. It's added together. So if they are at a 2, you're getting +1 stress when you get stress, and everybody's critically more. If you are at a 1, then you're getting 2 more stress on that. And if you're at a 0, the monsters are dealing 2 more stress to you, they're dealing an extra crit, they have more accuracy, and they're dodging more. So it just adds up and gets worse and worse for you. So the higher you have that torch, typically the better that you have a time of. So ideally you're in the light. You don't want to be in the dark too much. Now, the enemies are going to be in a very similar thing. They're not going to have the round or the torch, but they have the same positions. So they're going to have a support, and a ranged, and a defense, and an aggressive spot. Okay, so you've entered a room, you're going to fight. What do? You draw a card. Now, this is kind of interesting because unlike where you just have a whole bunch of map tiles, instead you have a tile, and that tile is the map. And so you would draw this beacon of light. And this is a tile that you will lay down. It'll have these rooms and these kind of hallways and whatnot. Now, things to point out here, there's just a few. First of all, your starting positions. Oftentimes you'll be split up. So you go wherever you are. So if you're aggressive, you're going to be here in the lower left. If you're ranged, you're going to be here in the lower left. If you're support or defensive, you're going to be over here in the middle bottom. There's a limit to how many people can be in each spot. That's the little dots in the upper left-hand corner. And then you'll notice these red and green kind of BAMs, or the kind of the damage icon, or a wild card, I guess you could say. And the card will specify what that is. It'll be different for every single card. So in this one, it's Stressful Darkness. The corridors are too dark. Heroes ending their turn here will suffer 1 stress. So if you stay here in this entire corridor here on the left, you're going to be more stressed out. You need to come towards light. And you can see that reflected in the art as well, which I think is very, very nice, because this is custom to the specific map, which the map isn't made by a tile that has to be reused somewhere. It's literally, that's the map. And so they can really tie everything together. So the light does end there, and you can see the light ends in this corner here and all the way down here. So it very much is reflected in the art as well. I thought that was a nice touch. The enemies will spawn similarly. So the support will be in the upper right-hand corner, the defensive in the middle, and then the aggressive and ranged in there. So you have some enemies between you when you start out. Now, maybe these guys have to fight their way, but maybe they're struggling with these two. And really, your support person's really good at getting rid of ranged. And so you have to move him over here, but then there's the defensive guy over there. So you can see how by splitting yourself up and having people in different locations, it automatically at the get-go kind of sets you in a very interesting position. The only other thing you'll notice is that there is some loot icons, and so you'll see a little treasure chest in the lower right-hand corner. That's some good stuff. Okay, so here's another one. This is the ritual chamber, and this one says that, hey, guess what? People are just getting more stressed if they are in a red spot, which are just the 2 corners in the upper right-hand and upper left-hand. Now, you'll notice here that you start with some loot, so maybe you take some time and do the loot, but remember, you only have 4 turns, and you only get 2 actions on your turn. And so it'll go kind of fast paced. So you got to be careful what you get, what you don't get. That being said, if you finish this map and the loot's still there, it's gone. You don't get it. You got to keep going, keep pressing on. Okay, so now here is your hero card. Here's where a lot of the meat and potatoes are. And I love meat and potatoes. They're both delicious. We're going to get some smashed potato, loaded mashed potatoes here. There's a lot here. It's going to be tasty. It's going to be delicious. Okay, so first is your kind of character. And you got a little art here, and that'll match your miniature fairly well. It looks to me like the sculpt will even match, which would be kind of nice. It means as a painter, you can paint it quite well too, especially because you get to see all the way to the feet, and I like that. Over here on the, kind of to the left of that is your level, and that's, you'll have a different card per level. So if you level up to level 2, you're going to get your version of level 2, and you're going to put it there. If you're level 3, again, you're going to put it there. There are 3 main levels. You're going to have your resistances down here, your health, and your movement, and your dodge. And so you have, dodge is essentially a subtraction from accuracy. We'll get into that a little bit more. Health is pretty self-explanatory. When you reach 0, you actually go into a death blow state where you could die at any moment from any attack. We'll touch that on in just a second here. And then, of course, you have your movement, which again is self-explanatory. It's room to room, essentially. There are no spaces in the room. Your resistances and immunities affect different buffs and debuffs. So, for instance, this Hellion here is resistant to bleed, so it's they don't bleed, which is great. You'll also have a town power or 2 that you get to do. So, for instance, in the sharpen pear or sharpen spear or whatever that might supposed to be, I don't know. You start the next dungeon with a buff for 5 turns, essentially. Or you can intimidate, or you can remove the caretaker from his position. We'll talk about the town in a little bit. And then the symbol in the lower right just means you're on death blow. So you actually put your dice there, and you're rolling a dice to see if you die or not every time you get hit. It's pretty cool. In the upper right, you're going to have your stress, and you'll notice that there's kind of a slash in the last mark, and that's because you actually get there twice. So the first time you get all the way to 10, you are going to see if you're going to roll a 10-sided die on a 1 or a 2, you get a virtue, which means, you know what, you're actually angrier and you're critically more, or you're extra fast now, or you got an adrenaline rush or whatever, right? There's these different virtues that are actually a buff. It's rare, but it can happen. And it's great when it happens, by the way. Or you could just start getting like very pessimistic and suddenly you have all these negative comments you're saying and debuffing everybody around you or doing whatever it might be. It's bad news and you're actually worse for wear there. Maybe you're slowing down or doing whatever. So you want that virtue, but you're either going to get a virtue or 80% of the time you're going to be getting a bad part too. Now, if you reach that again, then you have a heart attack. So then you're just dead. So don't reach that twice. Don't get to 20 stress. If you get to 20 stress, it's not good. It's not good. Over here, you're going to have a disease. You can only have 1. So if you get a new disease, you replace it. And then over here, you get either positive or negative virtues. And so you can have a positive one or a negative one, or sorry, a trait. Positive is good. You want those. Negatives, either they add up or they replace a positive. If you ever get 4, then again, that's bad news. You're dead. Now, I've said dead a few times here, so I'm going to stop before we even get into hero skills and kind of clarify this point. When you play Darkest Dungeon, it is very much like a roguelike game, at least the video game is. Now, I've not played the game per se, but it is kind of ingrained in the game that your character might very well die. It happens. You can recruit essentially another character. I will talk about that in the town phase, but you can come right back in. You're not out of the game. You're out of that battle, right, until you resurrect again. And by the time you get to the next battle, you should be good. If you can't, well, then it's game over for everybody. You got to restart. So, again, we'll talk about that a little bit in the town phase, but these people might die. Like they're going to die of heart attacks. They're going to die of all sorts of terrible things. They're going to be the most kleptomaniac, pessimistic guy ever and just give up. I mean, there's some bad stuff that happens. The only other thing I'll note here is that the hero skill, you'll notice, matches the level. So you have 7 abilities that you can pick from. And of those 7 abilities, you're going to pick at level 1, 3. You're going to put 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. At level 2, you unlock a 4th one, and you'll have 1 here. And at level 3, you'll have another one, and you'll do it here. You can change those skills every time you go to the after questing, when you come back to the town. And so you can kind of change up and dynamically change, oh, you know what, that didn't work out too well, or I didn't like that, or this combination would be better, or whatever. Or especially if you unlock a second one, that might work with another one. You're like, well, now I want to slot that in. You can do that in between quests. So you'll kind of get more options available to you as you go. Additionally, your skills can also upgrade. Again, we'll talk about that in the town part. Okay, the only other thing I want to note is currently right now, and again, I think they're actually looking at this just to see if there's another way to do it, but I actually really like this way. I think it's really, really smart. But as you get buffs and debuffs, you can essentially make it to where you're bleeding, and so you take two bleed every time. And maybe you have that for 3 turns. Now what you'll do is you'll have a stack of the tokens that you need kind of right there, and you just take the token off. They do. Now, you could be bleeding and being stunned, for instance, for 2 turns. So you'd be bleeding for 3 turns, stunned for 2 turns, and then you could get another bleed that's 1 point for only 1 turn, or something like that, right? Now, what that does is it all stacks. So you have these different stacks of tokens, and you just take 1 off of each token, and okay, I took a double bleed there, a single bleed there, and a stun there, until it's empty, right? So if you have a stun for 2 turns, you have 2 stun tokens. By the time you take the second one off, that stack's gone. So that's kind of how it works right now, and I actually think that's great because it is kind of a complex game mechanic, but that's super simple to do. It really is. They're looking into other ways to do it, so that might change, but for now, that's what it is, and I actually quite like it. I think that's a good way to handle it, especially with multiple bleeds, or being stunned again, or so. I mean, there's different things that can come up in the game where you just have multiple buffs and debuffs. It could be positive too. Sometimes positive things happen. Okay, moving on. Here is the enemies and how they'll work. And again, it's fairly similar. They have some stats up here, like this is an armor upgrade where essentially they half the damage rounded up. It could be rounded down too. They have their immunities and their resistance. They have their movement. These bone soldiers barely move and they only have 7 health. So just kind of slow, moving kind of stuff here. Then they have these kind of tiers on what they're going to do, right? So they're going to target perhaps the most wounded or perhaps the furthest. Then you have a range icon, which is right here. In other words, they're going to be attacking a space away from them, not in their space. That'd be a 0. And then the red dot says how many people they're attacking. So you could have a dot, dash dot, dash dot, dash dot. You're attacking all 4 people within that range if there is enough people there. The other thing you have is a crit and a accuracy. In this case, the Graveyard Slash has a critical 1 and an accuracy 9. Now, this is different than a lot of games I cover and play, so I want to make sure this is clear. You want to roll at the number or under. So if you are at a 9, then you want to actually do a 1 through 9 on that D10 to be able to land the hit. Now, remember that dodge is subtracted from that, so the opponent's dodge. So if they're attacking you, you have a dodge of 2, then that actually subtracts from the 9. So now it's a 7. Right? So they have to roll a 7 or lower, so it's harder to hit. It's a little backwards from a lot of the games I cover, so I want to make sure that's clear. So when you're looking at this, you understand. Then this is the damage behind it. So if you roll anything under a 9, or whatever it is minus the dodge, you're going to do 5 damage to 1 person 1 space away, ideally the most wounded person. If you roll a 1, in other words, like the lowest number you can, then that's actually critical and you're going to be doing 9 damage instead of 5 damage. And then, of course, there are some pros and cons to things you can do. I'm going to go and swap to this character here because there's a lot more here, as you can see in this one. And again, they move 2 and they have 11 armor, or 11 health. And they're attacking just the closest person to pure melee. But you'll notice these kind of buffs and debuffs. And so one thing happens to them, for instance, they're able to pull 1, so they can pull 1 over to the self, so they go up in the ranking because they want to be melee, so they want to be up front. So if they're in the second spot, if you push them back, or they're going to pull themselves right back up. Additionally, they have it where like they could give you a single bleed for 3 turns, they could debuff your critical for 2 turns, and they can give you +1 stress. On this bottom one, you'll notice that it's a +1 with a hunter's mark. That hunter's mark, again, modifies it. So if they have a hunter's mark on the enemy and they're attacking an enemy with a hunter's mark, then they will do more damage. So you'll get pairs of enemies that are really bad. You'll get pairs of enemies that, like one enemy lays those marks down, but now that he's doing that, all these cultist brawlers are actually doing extra damage to you. So there's that kind of stuff at play when it comes to that. And then, of course, as you can see, there's the range and then how many people you're doing there. That's mostly all of the enemies, and really your attacks too, they do the same thing. Now, I'm back at these dice. So if you recall, I mentioned how on your character card, it's really bad, and you hit that stress and you get that skull symbol. Well, now every time you're taking damage from one of these bad guys, instead of taking damage because you're at 0 damage, you roll this die, and if you roll the skull, you're dead. That's just the way it is. If you're able to get healed back up, you can heal back up to 1 health. Just 1 health, and suddenly you're not at death's door again. But if you get to death's door again, if you get to that 0 health again, so you can go 1 health, 0 again, you're at death's door again, and again, and again. It depends. Hopefully you can heal out of it or stay safe, but it's just a matter of time before you roll that skull and eventually will die. That being said, I've done it in the video game, so you can do it here in the board game too. You can be on death's door for a while and you can just luck out. I mean, it's bad luck to be at death's door to begin with, but it is certainly possible you can do that. And that's, I think, a very cool mechanic just in general. Okay, I want to talk briefly about these diseases. You can only have one at a time. It replaces it. As you see, this one is adding a blight, which, as again, just hurts you. So you're having a 1-tick blight for two turns, and you're taking 2 damage per character level. So at 1 level, you're taking 2. At 2 levels, you're taking 4. And at level 3, you're taking 6. Yikes. Okay, now let's go back to the town. The first thing you're going to do in the town, before anything, is take a town event card. Here's a back of one, just to kind of show you. This town event card is called Labor Force. It says roll to upgrade a building at random for free. You cannot visit it this week. Discard this event for the week, or from the deck. So in other words, you're upgrading a building, so you can upgrade it for free, which is great. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But now you can't visit that. So hopefully you didn't need to heal if that was a hospital. Hopefully it wasn't the tavern if you need to get relieve stress. Hopefully it wasn't, the shopkeeper if you wanted to buy some stuff, because you're not going to use it that time. So you have to go to the next battle without going to that place. So pros and cons, right? Pros and cons. On the bottom, you're going to see how many days you have to do things. Essentially, you're going to be assigning yourself out each day to do different things. In this case, you have 3, and then you got to go back out there and go fight. So that can be lower, it can be higher. That's just kind of what it is. Let's go back to the town. Now, here is kind of the town. You can see there's a lot of stuff here. Here's the different days. You can go anywhere from, 0 to 4. 0 is the battle, and then the 1, 2, 3, and 4, depending on how many days you have. So you can kind of keep track there. And you'll see that there are different upgrades. This is this tavern one, the sanatorium one, the abbey one, the blacksmith one, the nomad wagon one, the stagecoach one, right? And essentially with this, you can essentially pay money and put your person there and heal some stress at the tavern, or remove a disease from the sanatorium. But if you're removing the disease from the sanatorium, nobody else is doing that day. So, or removing your quirks, or gaining a virtue for the next round. So I talked about how you gain a virtue or a quirk, and then afterwards you die of a heart attack. Well, if you start out with a virtue, you just got that 10 stress, so you better not get too stressed. So you can kind of combine them like that. Now, there is a caretaker here. He's on the back of the quest card. All right, now he's going to be just sitting around, taking up space, being rude about it. But as you saw, there was that Hellion who can actually go and then, move him out of the way if you need to. But if you're not playing as her, if you don't have her, then you can't do that unless somebody else has that kind of ability. So anyway, you're going to kind of be going around here and upgrading here. And, you can go and get buffs or debuffs, or you can buy trinkets from the Nomad Wagon. You can upgrade your ability cards to be stronger, which is great. You can visit the graveyard. You can go to the abbey. You can do all this different stuff in preparation for your next battle. And then you draw those quests. You do those 2 quests, you fight that boss battle, rinse and repeat. That's the game. That's Darkest Dungeon by Mythic Games, based off the Red Hook game. And it's something I'm actually pretty excited about. We're at the opinion part now, and I guess all I can say is that, I really like the theme of Darkest Dungeon. I'm much more into the dark, gritty, cool, bloody, demonic, kind of awesome stuff like that. I want to be a crusader that can decapitate an undead necromancer. That just sounds awesome to me. I'm all about that. Let me do that in your game, please. So anything like that's kind of cool. Again, I don't know too much about the bosses. However, in the video game, each boss has its own thing. So the necromancer, for instance, summons a lot of guys. He just keeps summoning guys, and it's the stupid ads. And so there's all that. I think my cat just sneezed. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff that you can expect in this game. There's going to be a lot of different items from the trinkets. You can customize how your people are leveled up. So you can level up different skills, the ones you prefer. You can change out their loads. If you die, you can come back to the stagecoach where you have, at least at stage 1, 2 unused heroes, but obviously that can increase. By the way, as you gain XP, I guess I didn't quite cover this. You'll also put that same amount of XP at the stagecoach. And what that means is when you get that character, you'll be able to level them up, not their ability cards, but you'll be able to level that hero up to the level that you have so that your XP matches exactly everybody else's. So you can get right back into the swing of things. So maybe at a little bit of a disadvantage, but it's not too punishing from a multiplayer experience. But again, you have to pick from those heroes. So if you have the Jester and and Crusader, and you didn't want that, well, I mean, you're gonna have to pick one of those, right? That's who showed up at the Stagecoach, which again, very much like the video game. So, anyway, that's Darkest Dungeon in a nutshell. I'm actually pretty excited. As a fan of the video game, I liked seeing all the similarities. I was actually surprised when I first saw those map tiles. I was really worried because the game is very side-scroller. You have 4 people here, and you fight each other. And that's really the game. Literally, that's all of the game. And so having a map seemed kind of weird, but being able to attack multiple people and the range thing, all that I think is fine. I think it makes for solid gameplay stuff. But then seeing the diseases and the quirks and the abbey and the stagecoach and the person taking up the spot all the time and then going on these quests where you have to scout and do the little scout thing, and you found a trap, and now you're hungry, you got to eat some food, or you can camp, and you do all of this stuff just it resonates with me as a fan of the video game. So I'm super excited about that, and it just seems kind of nice. I really like the token system that they thought of. I think that's great. I was wondering how they do that, because you either have to dumb it down and just mean, you can only have one debuff at a time, but the game doesn't play that way. The game, you can stack on those bleeds like nobody's business. You can get stunned and bled and blighted and to Kingdom Come and debuffed and all this kind of crap. You can have a string of negatives attached to you, and so being able to do that just based off tokens that you just take off one at a time. Super simple to know what affects you. Super simple to know how longer it's going to affect you, and it's scalable, right? So you can go to that. So I actually really like that. And I think the combat system seems fairly good. Not all of my group, I think, will be a fan of it, just because a lot of them like a whole bunch of dice versus the slightly more deterministic hit or don't hit, which is kind of what this is. This is very much like Arena or even Townsfolk Tussle, where you roll, and that roll determines if you hit or not, or if you criticaled or what, but it's just kind of a single roll to see what happened. So some people are a fan of that, some people are not. I'm fine with that, because I think it's very streamlined, and the game flow is just so awesome when you do that, because you just roll, bam, I know what I did, and then we're done. So I'm excited for it. Let me know what you think. Are you excited for this? I'm going to be covering a lot of Mythic stuff here soon. I know they're delivering Super Fantasy Brawl, so I'll be getting that very soon, actually. I think it's kind of right. I mean, it's getting close, so it'll be here hopefully by the end of the month. I don't know exactly the timing, but I know it's on its way. So super excited about that. And then, of course, Solomon Kane will be next. I will be covering that as well. And I almost imagine we might get that before the Pledge Manager even closes in Darkest Dungeon. So with those 2 deliveries, I think we're in a really good spot. Because they're also doing enchanters in between that as well. So anyway, that's it for me. Again, if you have any questions at all about the game, about my thoughts on it, or if you just want to share your own thoughts on either part of it, again, comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found the video helpful. If you found this informative or helpful in any way in prepping you for the Kickstarter so that you can be a more well-informed consumer, hit that like button. It takes a second, and it really does help me and the channel a lot. It lets YouTube know I like it, and it lets that AI overlord that encompasses my life on YouTube know that you liked it, and it'll just show up for other people to also be helped. So that's super helpful. And of course, you can share it wherever you need to if you think somebody else might be interested. That's it. That's all I had. I'm done talking. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day.